Hi guys, my name is Sive and this is Stories in Sive. In today's video, I'm going to talk about 3 recent thriller reads that I think that you should pick up. I love thrillers as a genre, and recently I have been able to isolate a few different tropes and a few different themes or concepts that throughout books I am actually finding a pattern that I love, and that's very exciting. It just helps me moving forward to pick thrillers and horrors that I'm more likely to enjoy. Today we're just talking about mysteries and thrillers, and I've got a little bit of variation for you. So the first thriller that I'm going to recommend is The Husbands by Chandler Baker, and I read this recently and absolutely ate this up. This story follows a mom and wife, Nora, as she is bracing herself for a promotion in her career. She is trying to prepare and do her best. She is also pregnant with her second child, and she has a 3-year-old? 4-year-old? Basically, all of the big life transitions is hitting Nora, and this book is an exploration on womanhood and motherhood and keeping a house and marriage and division of labor and responsibility between a husband and wife. It is a domestic thriller. She and her husband are looking for a new home and come across this neighborhood in which there are a group of moms who are all very accomplished in their career, who befriend her and start to try and help her with her offer on a house, and they also need something from her as there was a recent fire, and Nora is an attorney, and so she needs to look into whether the fire was an accident and there was someone killed in that fire, and that's kind of where the thriller element comes in. I love books about like mom relationships, and like Facebook mom drama for some reason is like my new thing in thrillers. It was the reason why I loved The Hunting Wives by May Cobb, and it's just like so appealing to me. It's very entertaining. These moms have something else going on. Like, you can very much tell that they are suspicious in certain ways, and the way they talk about their husbands and the way they talk about like their house being kept up and responsibilities is very like opposite of our culture as far as like cooking and cleaning and getting the kids ready for school and remembering it's picture day. It's just like all of the mental ownership is expected for the husbands to do instead of the wives. So I loved this book for a couple of reasons. The first being that domestic thriller, the mom drama theme that is perpetuated throughout the story. I loved the commentary on marriage and womanhood and motherhood in this book. I thought it was not really like the best writing I've ever encountered, but I enjoyed the way that she handled that theme throughout the book. And lastly, something I'm learning about myself is I enjoy an ambiguous ending. Now, there's definitely a conclusion in this book. You find out what happens. However, like in the epilogue, there's like a couple of themes that kind of come back, and it just leaves you thinking like, hey, I wonder like what happened to this character. I wonder what happened to this relationship, and it kind of gives you a little bit of space to start speculating and drawing your own conclusions. And I love it when the writer like trusts the reader and the audience to go down those bunny trails and draw their own conclusions. The next thriller that I have read and loved recently is White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is the only YA on this list, and this is a horror like haunted house story. It was pitched to me as horror, however, I don't know, like it's walking that line between thriller and horror. So I'm including it in this list because it was a scary, spooky book that I've enjoyed recently and I think other people need to read. In this book, we follow a teenager, Marigold, and her family as they move into a new house that has recently had some construction done on it. There was some renovations in the house, and her mother's job has allowed her to establish this connection with the landlord, and the landlord is letting them stay there for very, very cheap. The family itself is in a very large transition period because Marigold's mother has recently married Marigold's stepdad, and now she also has a stepsister. So there's a lot of like situational unrest for Marigold, and then there's also an element of mental illness for her as she is struggling with fixations on bed bugs and OCD tendencies with that. So that was just another layer of thriller suspense that was added to the narrative that I really enjoyed. And then this house. This house is like its own personality. Like, it's basically another character in the book. Some very, very, very creepy stuff starts to happen whenever they move into the house. And it's just the makings of a haunted house story. Temperature changes when you're walking through certain rooms, bad smells when you're walking in certain rooms, stuff being moved without like people touching them, and noises. And Marigold starts seeing things that other people aren't seeing. This is one of the cases where the main character knows she's not crazy. Sometimes in thrillers you get a character who is very like, oh my gosh, am I going crazy? But Marigold knows she's not going crazy, but the way she confidently talks about her experiences and what she's been seeing and all this creepy stuff that's going on, it makes her sound crazy to her family, so her family don't believe her. So this house was like a very large portion that the main story happens in that setting. And then if you zoom out a little bit, there is a larger setting of this new town that they're in, which is full of a lot of socioeconomic divide. Like, there's a very clear, like, this is where people who aren't wealthy live and this is where people who are. And it just is very like a superstitious town as well. And there's a lot of legend around this house. And as Marigold starts to go into the new high school, you know, she gets weird looks and all that sort of stuff. And so that is also a very, very large like portion of the book as well. It's a whole different plot line. So yes, I loved this book. I flew through this. I think I read it in like less than 24 hours. It was just so easy to read. That YA writing is just so digestible, and I enjoyed the story, I enjoyed the characters, and I thought it was really great. And if you're interested in picking up a haunted house YA thriller, I would definitely recommend White Smoke. Even though this is Tiffany D. Jackson's first venture into the horror thriller genre, I was so impressed. And the last thriller that I have read recently that I'm excited to recommend to you is The Turn of the Key. I'm a little bit late to the hype on this one. This was published in 2019 and is a BookTube favorite. People really ate this book up around 2 or 3 years ago, and I am now part of that community. We follow our main character Rowan, who comes across an ad for a nannying job at a very, very large house in a Scottish Highland town, very much in the middle of nowhere, and there's 2 or 3 kids to be taken care of, and they're looking for nannying help, and they have very, very great pay. Again, this house and this setting is very much one of the scariest portions of the book. The house is very potent, and it is a smart house. It has a lot of technology in it. It's like you can talk and they'll be like, I'll add this to your grocery list, and like lights turn on and off without like people doing anything. It's very technologically advanced, and that makes Rowan very uncomfortable. And as stuff and as creepy stuff starts to happen around the house, it is very much like, oh, is this system malfunctioning, or is there something like really going on? And so the setting of the house, as well as just like the Scottish landscape, is a very, very important part. Very isolating. She's very much on her own. The mother and father leave to go on business. They are both architects, which is why this house is so smart, even though the house itself is very, very old, but they came in and renovated it and have modernized and very kind of like Frankensteined the house. And so Rowan is quite literally thrown into this weird nannying relationship with kids. She's just really like trying to keep her head above water, and then this really weird stuff starts to happen. And in the synopsis, this is not a spoiler, but Rowan is writing this story to a lawyer from prison after she has been arrested for murder of one of the kids who she was in charge of. So this whole book is chronicalized in like a storytelling aspect, and you as the reader are very much coaxed into this descent into like insanity and madness as you watch Rowan become more and more unhinged. And the sequence of events that just happen are very, very potent and vivid to the reader. And that was one of the reasons why I loved this book, is that chronicalization of her descent into insanity. You're just like very much coming along with her, and you're like, you know what? Maybe I wouldn't have made that decision, but I totally see why she did that. And then that decision led to da-da-da-da-da. So it's very, very good in that aspect. This writing was really good as well. I definitely enjoyed this. It was my first Ruth Ware, And then lastly, it also had that ambiguous ending. So again, it was concluded. You did find out what happened, but there's very much an open-ended, well, if this happened, then, well, what else is gonna happen? And I love that. It just makes me think about the book more. It more solidifies the characters in my head, because after I finish a book, it's not like oh, that's the end of Rowan's story. You know what? Like, I have these hypotheses of what ended up happening to her. And yeah, I just found it really addicting. Also, I listened to the audiobook for this one, and that was absolutely hypnotizing. The accents were so good. The voice actor was impeccable. So these are my 3 thriller recommendations that I have read recently that I am just so excited to have under my belt, and it definitely taught me that I love ambiguous endings for sure. Also, again, I just love the mom group vibes. I love the like subsequent drama that ensues. I'm very much all about the vibes of I support women's rights, but more importantly, I support women's wrongs. And lastly, I've learned that I enjoy books that explore that supernatural element, very much toying with the reader of, is this person experiencing something supernatural? Are they going crazy? Is there something else more literal and physical going on? So yes, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you will pick up these thriller recommendations. And if any of those things that I mentioned that I love, you have read, please give me recommendations, because I am trying to beef up my TBR with books that I know I'm gonna like now that I have learned these couple things that I know I love. So if you have any recommendations for me, please leave them in the comments. I would love to know what you guys have read recently that you have enjoyed. And yes, thank you so much for joining me. If you enjoy other bookish content like this, feel free to subscribe. I would love to have you. And other than that, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.